So firstly, congratulations, you're all here. You're all business leaders. You have a PhD in human intelligence, but that will be quickly made redundant soon. So we are humans working with AI. The future is AI working with humans. So it's good that you're all here because you'll be the next wave of the leaders of these AI organizations. When I like to start with this with really talking about how the internet that we know is built on layers. Now, removing infrastructure, security, and DNS, and the base kind of hardware infrastructure and Cisco, things like that. Really, our world today is built on a series of layers. And if we think back and to the late 90s, we had kind of the first layer that was created, which is the browser layer. You all remember Netscape? Yes, that was good times back then. And then on top of that, there was two really smart people in the garage in Silicon Valley who made 287,000 in their first year of revenue. Those two people created a search layer that sat on top of it because you had all these websites and you couldn't remember the URLs that you're putting in. So you had a way to search for it with natural language. And these two great and smart people built an amazing organization that slurped in the entire internet, right, into that business and created a business that does 267 billion per year out of it. On top of that, you had the mobile layer and you had the social layer. I just rewatched those on the plane. Great movie, great movie. But it really talks to how really that was about connecting all the individuals on top of this layer, right? And things like health and wellness with your Apple Watches and your Android watches that couldn't exist. This multi-billion-dollar industry couldn't exist without the mobile layer sitting on top of it, and so on and so forth, right? And now we're into this new layer that's being created, and the term is yet to be determined. We call it the agentic layer here at Decidr. But if we're talking about the agentic layer, and there's people far smarter than me out there, and Jensen Huang, he's a cool guy. He's always got that really sweet leather jacket on. He's got a good stylist. And what Jensen says is that the agentic layer will be commercially more impactful than all the other layers combined. So just like take a moment to let that sit in. That is trillions of dollars of economic value that's going to be created out of this new layer that's sitting on top of it. Because for the first time, we have intelligence that we can buy on demand. Now, there's debate whether or not that intelligence is reasoning or whether it's just memorization or things like that. But inevitably, we're progressing forward into an era where we can rely on this new technology to do quite remarkable things that humans could do before. Just to talk about how the industry works, I had the privilege of working for a company called Appen. It competes with Scale AI, which just got purchased by Meta, 49% for $10 billion. But how the LLM pipeline works, so you have a model creator. So that's OpenAI or Google in this case. What they do is they create their base model. And what you need to do is you need to seed that base model with data. And these models are highly specific. So there is a model just for cats. There is a model just for golden retrievers. And to share a story, I worked on a large project where if you take a picture in your phone of your pet, it automatically gets put into a folder. So I was working for a company, and one of the big companies named after a fruit. And we had to collect 1 million pictures of golden retrievers. And we collected 1 million pictures of golden retrievers from Australian dog owners. And we put them through our pipelines, and we had tens of thousands of people put boxes around those golden retrievers and say, this is a dog. Because remember, you have the front of the dog, the back of the dog, dog at night, dog in the day, dog with a bone in its mouth, et cetera, et cetera. And the principal scientist came back to me after we submitted this data. And to speak to the principal scientist is a really amazing thing because this company is so compartmentalized that the left hand sometimes doesn't know what the right hand is doing by design. And this principal scientist to me said, we can't use this data. I said, what are you talking about? I was like, data's clean, it's gone through our pipelines, it's excellent. And they said, David, we need American golden retrievers. So that's a true story. So we had to redo the pipeline. I learned something new. I still can't see the difference, but apparently there is one. But really what that means is all these models or the base models that we all use to interact with, don't forget, they were built on the back of millions of humans to tune them and to train them. Now, once you have a model, it is highly valuable because now you can have people interacting with it. And why companies, we believe, why companies like Google, why Meta, why OpenAI and Anthropic, why they're building these models and investing tens of billions of dollars into them is that they will increase the cloud revenue spend by factors. You know, Jensen recently in the last couple of months I said that the AI software wave, this is the new wave. We're kind of maturing the large language model wave right now. Will increase cloud revenues by 10 times. Then on top of that, you have AI robotics. So think about your Roomba moving around in your home. Is that it needs LiDAR, it needs geospatial, it needs visual, it needs large language models, it needs all these things, which will be 10 times on top of that. So you're looking at 100 times increase in compute, in storage, in RAM, and software. And so now we're in the AI software wave. And as you go through these models in LLM access, which these sit on top, there are three types of, I guess, companies or types of approaches within the AI software application layer. You have large language model wrappers. So that means it helps you prompt better. Excellent example is Cursor. That's a tool that's used by software engineers. It helps you code more effectively. That went to $100 million in annual recurring revenue in 9 months. So there is value for large language models, for wrappers. The second one is what we would call generative agents or vertical AI. So choose your SaaS platform. They have an aptly named agent. Those are the ones that are going to be built in vertical. So Salesforce has Einstein, HubSpot has Breeze, Dropbox has Dash, et cetera, et cetera. Now, these are going to drive productivity within that particular vertical, but we think that vertical approach is going to be quickly replaced by horizontal approach. You know, you hear me say that a couple times today that there's a secret war for data going on. And so just keep that in the back of your mind because I'll go a little bit more deeply into that. But the horizontal platforms, and that's a place where Decidr plays, is really about bringing aggregate data to within a business to give more context to artificial intelligence. Fundamentally, AI is a horizontal technology. And so what we'll see is we'll start to see how that horizontal approach will offer higher efficacy in business outcomes. But before we get to that, I put this slide up in January of this year. I was actually proven right of $40 billion of OpenAI raising. But the question is like, why can these companies raise so much money? Well, the question is there's a paper that was put out in 2018, which simply said, the bigger your model, the more tokens that you have, and OpenAI has 20 trillion tokens, the bigger your model, the higher the likelihood that if you gave it a new piece of information, it would get it right. That's what this graph says. Tokens processed, that's loss. And you see here, the bigger the model, the more accurate it's going to be when you give it new information. So there is a war going on. It's a rush for the biggest models in the world, large language models. And just to be clear, LLMs, large language model, that is just one of several types of models. There's a large vision model, there's a large reasoning model, there's a large geospatial model, and there is an emerging large quantitative model. So these are the big pillars that I believe, will start to set the scene for general artificial intelligence. And so there's a race is on because it's been proven with great companies like Google, who slurped in the entire web, that became the most successful company in the history of humanity, arguably, right? Yeah. Where are we? And where are we in terms of taxonomy and language? We are in the era of AI agents at the moment. Okay, so we've all used the generalist chat. We've all used ChatGPT. And of course, when we first went into it, it would have been absolutely remarkable, your first prompt. Your second prompt, that's pretty good. Your fifth prompt, you're like, that's a bit general. And then you get into things like lawyers putting in cases into ChatGPT and then submitting it to law to the actual court and getting destroyed. So the reason why generalist chat moves to hallucination and low inference, as you would see, is it has to process your prompt across 20 trillion tokens. So ChatGPT is a mathematician, it is a philosopher, it is an English teacher, it is a strategist, it is all those different things. And very importantly, large language models do not understand what you're asking of it. They are simply an enormous probability machine. That's why NVIDIA is worth so much money, is because for every single word, it's hitting a GPU and it's saying, what is the next best word to put in the response? It is simply a probability engine. And we can talk about vectorization later, but principally, that's what it is. And you would have heard about DeepSeek, and that made all this kind of rippling, is that what DeepSeek did is they just had a pragmatic view and they said, instead of looking at all 20 trillion tokens with every single word, let's look at the word. And the word is doctor. Maybe let's go to the medicine section, right? That's 2 trillion tokens. And instead of looking at one word at a time, let's look at 3 words at a time. And that's really what they did. So they just took a very practical view because they were constrained because they couldn't get these big high-powered chips that the US was holding back for geopolitical reasons. So now we're in AI agents, okay? An AI agent is task-based, and it can do that very, very well. So as the example of an AI agent is book me a flight. I can do that very well. We will quickly replace those. And you will hear today from Decidr, and I think from Rob as well, which we will move into agentic agents. Now, the difference between an AI agent and an agentic agent, AI agent is book me a flight. An agentic agent is find me a holiday my family will love. So it has to find creative ways of being able to solve that prompt. So what will it do? It'll go to your Instagram feed. It'll use a large vision model to try and see what holidays you've been on. It may go to your LinkedIn profile and look at your job title. It then goes into large language model and it finds what the average salary would be to see what you could pay for. And then it may ask you questions on where you've been before, right? Those are creative ways that it's finding to solve the goal. And lastly, if you have a collection of a number of agentic agents, and again, you'll hear more of this and see more of this today, is that collection becomes an AI-first organization. And all of you should be thinking about not how to put AI into your organizations, but how to reimagine your organization as an AI-first company with humans in it. That's the secret. When the internet was invented, David Jones was slow to move. They thought, let's just put terminals in David Jones and have people tippy-tap away. That's the way the world is thinking today. Online is different, right? As for bricks and mortar. The same thing goes for AI-first organizations. So what is an agentic agent? Here is one we've deployed in an e-commerce company. It's called Ava, which seems to be a popular name for an agentic agent. And because all of us, when we buy stuff on digital, we're all super jerks. I've been the big super jerk to this thing. So I haven't given it my name. The only instruction that we've given this agentic agent is to grow revenue by 20% over 12 months' time. That's the question, what is your best product? That is a very abstract question to ask a database. Now, sitting underneath Ava, we've connected this business's Xero account. It's Google Drive with God knows what's in it, the valuable things. It's Shopify account. It's Google Analytics, all of the horizontal data in this business. And natively, this agent is out of the box intelligent. Without training, without tuning, without orchestration and workflow, it's able to respond. That's the question, how does this compare to Nivea products? That's an agentic agent. It needs to solve that goal creatively. What it is doing is creating other agents to go out onto the web, and it's pulling in all the product information about Nivea. It's also accessing those product ingredients, and it's able through with the LLMs to be able to diagnose that and give a response, which is a fairly good one. You know, Edible Beauty is a highly focused organic skincare company. Nivea serves a wide audience, but it has chemicals in its product. Now, this agent, after 8 weeks, grew incremental revenue by nearly 5%. And after 12 weeks, it's nearly 10%. Now, for that business, that is 10% pure incremental revenue. So again, starting to think about the reallocation of capital, what they're able to do is take half of that, book that to operating profit. The other half, because capacity is unlimited and far less expensive than a human, they put more in ads. So you can create these really exciting flywheel effects. Now, on the left, Sephora, Mecca, Adore Beauty, and Gerlique. Those are AI agents. Those are all workflow-based or task-based. So I asked the first question, what is your best product? And they all work, right? Because they have to follow a pathway. Now, if you believe like, David, this is great. Why aren't there agentic agents everywhere? Well, they're quite complicated to build. This is Alexa. So tragically, the only thing we use Alexa for is to set timers and turn in my house, turn on the lights. But there are 67 submodels that go into this. When I was at Appen, I see another couple Appenites in the audience here today, we worked on this for 10 years to be able to provide the specificity and some of the remarkable outcomes. But it's a very complicated thing on creating a base model. And no matter what you hear on YouTube about building agentic agents in 15 minutes or less, I can promise you to build a commercial grade agent is far more expensive and it takes far more time. And the reason is you need to take all of these pieces of software and all kinds of crazy smart people, AI engineers, we were talking about it before. They get $500,000 base salary in Silicon Valley, apparently. So maybe we need to all change our job titles. But if you took 10% of this, you're going to be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in just software licensing. And then you have, on top of that, you need the people to start to build these and orchestrate these agents. Now, so what do we get? We are in a world of vertical agents, right? As I said before, choose your SaaS software platform and you can have your aptly named agent. Salesforce, 2 weeks ago, purchased Informatica, which is an ERP enterprise-grade AI database management company. They did that because in an AI future, you do not need a CRM system. Salesforce has an existential crisis. And as I said before, there's a secret war going on for horizontal data in organizations. And so with vertical AI, you get initial maybe sizzle, but it's not lasting, because imagine a future where we had nothing but vertical AI. They don't talk to each other. Einstein will help you sell more to your top customer, but it won't know if that top customer is a poor payer. What will you have to do? You'll have to get AI to connect each other. You'll have to get inference-based AI. You'll have to get AI to optimize your spends. You'll have to get all these things, right? And it's just stacking more. There's SaaS and there's AI, there's ASS. So I don't know what the acronym is, but it would be a big pain in the ass to be able to have all these subscriptions to start to manage. Now, because I'm hosting and because I'm executive chair, I can do a tiny little pitch. I promise it'll only be a minute. But the future is horizontal AI. It is highly contextual, bringing your multiple sources of data in your organization together and having AI manage that data. That is what Decidr is fundamentally. We are an agentic schema where AI manages, enriches, and expands your underlying data. Now, I'm going to use the word perfect. It's a bit of a hyperbole, but imagine we are humans. We are fallible. Imagine if AI is managing and structuring your business data all the time. That's why our agents can be so intelligent out of the box, because they just work with perfect data all the time, constantly expanded, and they're agentic, and they have a hole in it, they go fill it. We're doing this by deploying our onboarding studio, which is coming out next quarter. We're going to make it as easy to onboard an agentic agent as it is to hire an employee. What do you need to do? You need 3 things to hire an employee. You get them access to systems, you give them a goal, and then you help them. You tune them, right? Even humans, you tune them. This is the right way to do it. Do it this way, do it this way. That's what you'll be able to do in our platform. And we have a number of core agents, what we like to call. They will get far more specialized, but just like when you buy your Apple phone when it was first launched, do you remember in like 2007, it only had like 2 rows of apps on it, right? Remember the Photos app with the sunflower on it? Like that's what we're doing. We're deploying agents which every business can use, and that's in sales, that's in marketing, that's in customer service, that's in internal search. You know how many people in how many of your staff have asked you for your superannuation membership number? You do not need to do that anymore with our search agent. And that is going to start the agentic journey for many companies. And we've also partnered with several very large SaaS companies, both domestically and internationally, and we are their agentic partner. So we are building their agents with them to deploy, because we're in a rush to put one agent in as many companies as possible around the world. And we're partnering with, these are some of the companies that we're partnering with, everything from AI mentors with some of the brightest minds in the world, to recruitment, to HR platforms and such. Now, that ends my pitch. Just get it back to it. So what can you do as leaders in this new agentic future? So the first thing is forget about the technology. AI is about a reallocation of capital. I said before that e-commerce company was taking half of that new incremental revenue and putting it upstream in more advertising. And that was driving the flywheel. You've heard of the iron triangle. You can have it good, cheap, or fast. Choose 2. You can have all 3 of those things now with artificial intelligence. There's a Harvard study that was done a few years ago on 3.5, and they had consultants on BCG use 3.5 in just the basic terms, and they found that the best consultants increased their productivity by 25%, but even more importantly, the dumbest of the consultants increased by 40%. And so really what that says, and it was very early days, this is a bit outdated, but it says that when used properly, even the most rudimentary use of AI can have really positive productivity impacts on your business. Now, the second thing in terms of forgetting about the technology is we have been buying intelligence for over 100 years. Like, this is a new type. 100 years ago, there's a bunch of white guys with blonde hair who rode backwards in boats, right, on the East Coast at Ivy League schools. And they created the thing called the manager, right? And for the first time, you could buy management into your company. Not surprisingly, those people got together and they said, let's get together and let's create a consulting company, right? And for the first time, you could buy expertise, domain expertise, global domain expertise. And then fast forward to the late 90s, where it used to be really expensive. Like, I built software, it's really expensive back in the day to build your own software. And so venture capitalists got together with really smart people in the Valley, and they created a company called Salesforce, and they invested in creating the software, and they gave you a view of their intelligence. Like, we are literally getting a view of Salesforce, right? That's their IP, their intelligence. BPOs, we're using purchasing power parity, right, to buy intelligence. So this is no different. And if you think about it that way, it starts to really clear the path for looking at where you can start to apply it. And for us, we think about it really simply in your front office, in your middle office, or in your back office. And what are the things that you want? Well, I want faster TAT. I want higher revenue. I want a higher AOV. I want to have better intercompany communication. I want to have faster or more intelligent discovery in my organization. So as you're looking through these things, and we'll share this presentation, is in each of these things, start looking for obviously the most common things, which are role duplication and task duplication. But also, if you think about the future of an AI first business, literally our businesses have been shaped by SaaS software, right? So think about that. You have people going and doing things, tippy tapping it into a system, extracting that data, putting it into another system, tippy tapping away, et cetera, et cetera. AI doesn't need interfaces. Really important. It does not need the interfaces that we need. It has other metadata, which can expand its understanding of what it needs to do. And with this new agentic capabilities, you just need to give it a goal, and it will figure it out based on your code of conduct, of course. So start looking for things like long end-to-end intelligence. We've all asked for a report. By the time we get it, it's not very helpful, right? So you can look for things like that. And we have a tool, so you're welcome to talk to the team. We have a very robust kind of AI readiness tool and calculator that you can use. But really simply, we've chosen a couple random companies out of here, different sizes in different industries. You need to ask kind of a couple basic questions. The first one is like, how much are you spending on systems integration and maintenance? For Allied Care Group, which is a healthcare group, versus Woolies. Woolies has an enormous stack of data, right? However, you have to ask the question of how much of my workforce is actually interacting with these tools. They're tippy tapping into those tools. They're providing human entered data. Is that you think, Woolies is stocking shelves and they're not using these tools? The third line is, basically, there's a baseline out there that the cost of doing an individual task by AI as compared to a human is roughly 3% of the cost of a human task. And there's some pretty robust modeling out there to suggest that it is. But, double that, it's still quite remarkable in terms of its cost reduction. And the better question now is to move to, well, humans are limited by our biology, by the 8 hours a day that we work, by how many overpriced coffees that we buy during work hours, all these things. Well, AI is not. And when applied properly, you can have kind of factored productivity on the back of it. So this is the real question. And so as you go through this exercise, you should be asking yourself, going back to where I started, which is what percentage of your organization should be AI first? If you don't have that number, you better move fast and find it, because the companies that are AI first will vastly outcompete human companies, vastly. And we're going to be releasing this. So this is a snapshot into some of the, we just launched an AI readiness index in Australia. So that'll come out in the next week or so. But I thought to kind of put it out there to maybe light a fire underneath some of you, which is, surprise, surprise, AI is important for organizations. Less than half say it's an urgent priority. So this is a nationally representative sample. 39% are very confident in their company's ability to implement AI across their business. But 52% say, we're a bit jammed up. So I think what I want to do is just leave you with that, and I think we'll segue into Rob's presentation shortly. But if we think into the future, where we are today, we are in individual productivity. We have these new tools called Gemini, Flash, and ChatGPT that are helping us as individuals be more productive. Now there's productivity leakage because we're doing things faster and going out for more coffees, but this is an uncoordinated way. And I think we find it in the survey data that will come out, but that's what we've been experiencing, and that's why it's not showing in organizational productivity yet. The next logical stage is going into team productivity, but that is still vertical AI. And if you believe what I said about the point solution problem that we're moving fast into, that will still be siloed and uncoordinated. And if you think about a customer touches across the organization. And so we need to quickly move to get to organizational productivity. You need to have a horizontal approach. It's a logical outcome, right? And I'm not saying anything that's kind of mind-blowing here. AI needs high context. It needs to know what's going on in the organization to make impact. And then we haven't even talked about when AI starts to work with other AI, and AI organizations start to work with other AI organizations. And that is literally a reimagining of us as citizens in this world. And that's where we may walk into new levels of prosperity and new levels of ways that we will work together. And maybe we'll have a 4-day work week, maybe. So with that, thank you for listening. We'll do questions at the end. I'll pass it across to
me first. Yep. Thank you. All right, hello everyone. So DCB mentioned earlier, my name's Matt Langford. I head up the VC and startup ecosystem. Thank you. Oh, I've got one already. I can have two if you want. The VC and startup ecosystem across Asia Pacific region, based here in Sydney. So that means basically my team works with VCs to support their portfolio companies, helping bring innovation, help them build, grow, scale with Google Cloud, and of course with Google as well. So probably for the last 2 to 3 years, a lot of our messaging has been about AI. So when we think about innovation, we think about how can we try and get businesses ready for this agentic and AI transformations that needs to be happening right now. But also because my work is often with startups, it's actually working closely with a bunch of these native AI startups. So that's probably the starting point. And this slide has changed so much in the last couple of years in terms of the really incredible reference points that we've got now of businesses. You can see that this is a range of startups as well as scale up, some of the unicorns in there that are now building on Google Cloud, and a lot of them using the AI, our AI capabilities. Probably just a couple that I'll call out. So Heidi Health has recently just gone through a Series A. This is a AI transcribing tool for healthcare professionals, particularly doctors. And they've been working with us to actually drive a greater customer experience using our generative AI capabilities. We've got Lorikeet, which is again flying Blackbird funded company that's bringing AI through customer experience. Springboards, that's reimagining the creative agency process and really disrupting it, but disrupting it in a really positive way, not trying to take away creative agencies, but giving them a tool to be able to drive that process of creating new campaigns from start to finish, taking it from 2 weeks down to 2 days. So it's a lot about that kind of increase in terms of productivity. And the last one I'll mention is Canva, and Rob will go into this a little bit later. We've actually been working with Canva for a number of years. You can do live translation of languages, multi-languages across within, any user can be doing that within their canvases. Most recently, and in fact yesterday, we announced a partnership with them with VO3, which is our text to video generation model, that also includes audio generation as well. And so they'll be actually integrating that into Canva. Very exciting. So very quickly, we have the Google for Startups Cloud program. This is helping startups get up and running with Google Cloud. If you are at the start of your journey, you can get $2,000 of credits that actually last over 2 years to just get you started. Once you've received VC backing, you can get $100,000, or I'm sure everyone here, if you're building a startup, would be building. So you'd be able to get $250,000 for a year, and then the second year you get 20% of your costs covered, up to $100,000. If you do spend $250,000 in year 1, make sure you've got a really good plan for year 2, because it could be quite expensive. Loads of incredible training out there as well. Best place to go is cloud.google.com/startup. You'll be able to find your way through, a number of both instructor-led as well as online, on-demand training webinars. We do run hands-on labs, and then this can drive into a bunch of certifications as well, right? And you can see along the right-hand side there, we have different skill badges and certifications. There are these amazing learning pathways as well, based on your particular skill and background. So for instance, we even have like a program for AWS trained engineers to be able to get up and running the GCP, and like really tailored for that audience. The Google for Startups AI First Accelerator landed in Australia last year for the first ever time. We took 8 startups through a 10-week program, equity free. Seed to Series A is sort of the kind of target zone, although a couple of these were in the pre-seed category. And this is really an opportunity to kind of get very close with Google mentors. They're trying to solve a big problem that you're facing, or a challenge that you have that you're trying to potentially, this is not Google Cloud, this is cross Google. So it could be a go-to-market, part of your journey that you're looking to push out into a new market. It could be something to do with your actual AI sort of cloud tech stack, and so forth. Amazing program. Applications are open now, which is why I am raising it. Oh, and sorry, and it runs through from about October through to early December. So I'm going to hand over to Rob now, who's going to take you through the details. We'll be obviously there for some questions afterwards, and then we'll stand around afterwards. As I mentioned, my kind of main partners are the VCs. So if you have questions about funding as well, not from a Google funding perspective, from the broader ecosystem, please come and find me. Rob, over to you.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Great perspective, David. I'm going to steal a lot of those points, actually. I like the narrative. That really did a really good job at framing it up. And I think the industry is moving very quickly. And I think there's a bit of an analogy before I get into my pitch, but comparing it to even when electricity came out, people didn't know what to do with this technology. They treated it like a technology. They said, I'm going to take the initial use cases where I'm going to take everything I did during the day, I'm going to do it at night. That seemed logical until you start looking at, well, people need sleep. The workday ends before the night goes down. But now look at it. Time has shown that this has increasingly become something that's going to power TV, it's going to power GenAI, but you didn't know that at the time. Just like now we're in the middle of this GenAI revolution, and I love the pancake diagram. What are agents? What are we going to do with it? No one knows what this is going to look like in 4 years, 5 years. You don't have to wait for 20 years. What you need to do is get going with it. So a lot of your guidance really around finding something and just getting going with it is the same guidance I would give. So Google, starting with that large language model, the GenAI model, Gemini 2.5, this has been around now, obviously, for a few years. That's just the beginning. We're not actually talking about the LLMs as much anymore. We're really talking about agents because this is the brain, but it's doing nothing unless it's being distributed and creating value for the companies. So what we want to get into is how does this ecosystem of different tooling and technology start to fit together? Now, sometimes people who aren't necessarily in the technology world or in the research world, they sort of ask, well, where did this come from? This wasn't like divine inspiration. Somebody got hit by electricity and they dreamt up the transformer model. Everything is piggybacking or standing on the shoulders of previous innovation. So if you're in the habit of looking at white papers or academic papers, you'll see what's going to come down the pipeline. Now, it's no longer 10 years out. Now we're talking 6 months out. Heck, DeepMind's releasing white paper a few months back. That's already now being put into the cloud platform. This diagram, at face value, you're like, okay, yeah, this is the last 6 years. This goes from May 2024. And this is where Mike and I have lost most of our time trying to keep up with the US as they kept announcing these things. But you'll see models like Gemini and ImageGen, which is our image generation thing. But you're also going to see breadth. And the approach that we took was you needed breadth so you understood how it all fits together. So I see stuff with medical. I see stuff like weather next, GenCast, which is about transforming the way we predict weather. I'm seeing stuff about accessibility. I'm seeing Willow, which is our quantum chip. There's a lot of stuff that's being fed in from the research, both from Google, but also with our collaboration with academics and industries to try to build out what we think is this GenAI revolution, this agentic revolution. So again, this isn't about, and I think IT people tend to have this kind of perception of like it's on or off. I deployed the SaaS platform and now it's on. No, it's not about that. It's about building on your learnings and it's building on others' learnings, the collective intelligence of the community. For example, Genie 2, which was the second iteration of our World Foundation model, at face value, and the pictures don't do it justice, you think, well, I'm not an Atari or Nintendo. What this is trying to prove, just like with DeepMind and they did with AlphaGo, you start with the virtual world, you learn, you explore, and you use that to train other things. So a lot of the stuff that we learned from the AlphaGo, which was the video game or the game playing models, turned into AlphaFold, which is our protein folding model. Genie is going to be very important because it creates a realistic virtual world, a digital twin of the world, if you will. That's going to allow us to create, synthetic data. That's going to allow us to test agents in a world where physics and other types of forces can be modeled. And it's going to allow us to start to do reinforcement learning in computer time. Humans are used to learning. We go to school. We spend 12 years of our life or so. Agents don't have to go through that kind of fine tuning. They can do it at Mach 10, right? But you need a virtual foundation world. So this is why you hear a lot of the research groups talking about foundation worlds. To bring that in a little bit more into commercial reality, this has allowed us to come out with what we call as our Gemini robotics. If I go and talk to like the Coca-Cola factory teams, they talk about robotic arms that they spent $40,000, $50,000 on, and it really could only do this. You ask it to make a cocktail, it could probably do that. You ask it to play basketball or sign or pack a lunch, you're going to have issues. Using the same creative and foundation model capabilities that came out of Gemini, we've now created these variants for robotics. One is a vision language action model. So I can perceive what's going on, and instead of translating that to the next token for text, why don't I say, what's the next token for action? So move the arm 1 degree to the left and 1 degree forward. The other one is the embodied reasoning. So if I see something coming at me, how does this physical arm, how's it going to interact in this physical world? So variations of Gemini have now been starting to crop up because of this virtual world and all the training we've been able to do. I'm going to show a quick little video of this because I think it's interesting.
Bringing Gemini 2.0's intelligence to general-purpose robotic agents in the physical world. To be helpful, robots need to be interactive, responding live to your actions and your voice. They need to be dexterous to complete your most complex tasks. And they need to be general to understand things in your 3D world. And all of these capabilities need to work across different physical forms. We're bringing this together in Gemini Robotics, our most advanced vision language action model. Gemini Robotics is interactive. Can you put the bananas in the clear container? Notice how we move the objects and the model reacts and replans on the fly. Can you put the grapes in the clear container? Our model's low latency means it can respond live to rapidly changing conditions and instructions. This same model can generalize to all kinds of applications where you can collaborate with the robot live.
So for my sins, I spent most of Tuesday at the Gartner conference. And it's a fun conference if you're in medical or public sector. But a lot of the conversations were around robotics and everything from aged care facilities to hospitals as well. There's a huge industry for that. And the moving healthcare industry is asking for something that can generalize better and provide both emotional support, but also physical support. So robotics, I think, is just one example, though, of where you could probably go with some of this. Taking a step back, though, into agents, we've already gone through the evolution of everybody talking about OpenAI and Bard and Gemini and all the different models, right? We talked about RAG, and we started having board discussions a year and a half ago about vector databases. Everybody needed to know what a vector database was. Thankfully, we're not talking about vector databases. We then now talked about tools. Well, what if I could ask this model to go and do some research on the web? Or I can ask this model to go send me an email. Very simple tool usage. But this is still caveman days. Then we started looping that in with reasoning and basic agents. The single agent, if you will, started popping up. We're now, though, squarely in the multi-agent world, which is where you're actually going to get a lot more value. Now, one of the prerequisites for really getting a lot of that value out of it, though, is to still take us away from where we're right now, which is AI-assisted and conversational. And David, you had a great slide that just sort of talked about, great, single low-level task. Can you do a semantic search? Can you look up what's the closest Thai restaurant? We started doing conversational shopping. Okay, we're getting a little closer there. Semantic, natural language can do a few little tricks. What we want to do is flip the story. We want the AI agent to take control of planning the end-to-end process, a more complex process. And we let the human spend more time setting the objective and the goal and less time commanding and directing independently. So when we get into this autonomous or invisible or background agentic behavior, we're now talking about one or multiple agents always on, always watching, monitoring emails potentially to respond to a customer complaint, or constantly looking for signals in the market to try to then proactively respond to that signal. But it's about evolving towards the autonomous and invisible. Now, the prerequisite for that, as I said, is autonomy. Now, when we talked about a research paper earlier, one of the research papers I love is the co-scientist paper that DeepMind came out with. And that one's around medical stuff. But they started talking about the different specific roles, the very specific independent running roles. They're going to be collaboratively working together to solve these problems. And you're going to start seeing agent or sub-agents, if you will, that specialize in planning or even adjusting the plan as new information comes up. You're going to have agents that are really good at research, going out, looking at all the web, summarizing the websites, coming up with key findings. You're going to have action-oriented agents. And you're also going to have agents that start monitoring and deciding when the objective is met. In AlphaGo, it was quite simple. When you win the game, the story's over. Well, what about winning customers over and making a sale? Do you stop after the first sale or do you stop after the second? It's a very subjective thing. The beautiful thing about LLMs or generative AI, they don't have to be the full solution. Some of these sub-agents can lean on deterministic machine learning, your old school decision trees, your old school forecasting models. Let the generative AI model be creative. That's where it really excels. Until we get the quantitative models coming out, what I would say is that a lot of times the LLM is really good at modeling, thinking about what the world looks like, what a plan might look like, handing off to these sub-agents that can go and do a forecast to say the weather's going to be X, go buy bananas in Queensland because a typhoon is coming, and then turn it back to the LLM. So it's going to be a collaboration of a bunch of different types of agents, very specialized, potentially working in parallel. So now, 2023, 2024, we were all scrambling to figure out how this technology plays a role. We were enamored with the capabilities, and we all wanted to figure out how to get going with it. But you were required to get into the technology. You had to go get LangChain, you had to get Hive as a rag, you had to go do all this stuff. Thankfully, by the end of 2024 and now in 2025, we started seeing the abstraction of the technical detail and the complexities and the robustness, to be able to trust and scale. That's now becoming your foundation, your platform. That's where your enterprise data is going to sit. That's where all your security, safety, governance is going to sit. And of course, your applications, your integration, your agents, and your AI models. Why this is important, though, is because that allows you to focus on the distribution of your agents. It's about focusing on the experience or the workflow that you're trying to transform, and not about whether I use LangChain, LangGraph, Llama Index, or Google's thing. How do I get the technology? How do I get the data sorted? That is now your abstracted platform. You can focus on where the value is going to be created. In some cases, that's employee-oriented on this side. In some cases, it's the customer-oriented. And then as David went through, in some cases, this is about embedding analytics or agents into an application. So maybe from an employee perspective, embedding it into SAP or Dropbox, right? Or it might be on the customer side, embedding it directly in the customer service, the Genesis, the Next, the call centers, if you will. But I think the Decidr team would probably agree, I think the middle area, this is your custom digital channel, is going to keep expanding and taking over both the employee and the customer distribution or usage channels, because you have probably already invested a lot of time in building that digital channel. That is your relationship, that's your stickiness. In some degree, that's probably your differentiator. The SaaS platforms, by definition, are probably not your differentiator. So you're going to see this keep expanding and growing, I think. Now, note here, I tried to put a few bullet points. This isn't meant to be task-oriented. This is now more role-oriented. This is more about an objective-oriented. Software engineering, complaint management, customer service, shopping, pre-sales, technical support. These are activities that you already recognize as probably roles or departments within your group. Those are the areas I'd start focusing on and figuring out how you can put the magic pixie dust of agents and GenAI in there to help support that. A few examples here. So, as we sort of said, there's plenty of great technology out there. It took us a few decades to get to this point, but we've abstracted out the collective intelligence of the companies or the industries and created some really cool tech. But even right now, the tech doesn't play well together. If I wanted to string together Dynamics 365 and SAP and then put Power BI or Tableau on top of it, I got to go talk to my buddies, PwC and Accenture over here in Barangaroo, and I go cough up probably $20 million over 4 years, and I get a solution that I can now report, but it takes me a week to get the data from the SAP warehouse to my report. So this fragmented world works really well because it's allowed us to scale as a global company base, if you will, but it's not perfect yet. Now, this is just an example of what a Jira bot might look like. And from a Decidr perspective, this could be a search, this could be an employee lookup. But what if I'm now able to basically say in human language, multimodal, which means I might upload a picture, I might talk to it, I might stream a picture of it, and start asking it questions. In this case here, I'm asking a question about Jira. What are the top priority tickets right now? And it'll surface up, here's the outcome, here's the things, and then it lets me take action on it. Please create a meeting with my team on Monday to discuss this. Now, why this I think is important is Gartner talks about dark data, and yes, I drank a little bit of Kool-Aid over there. But dark data has been around for a long time. This is data, though, that is effectively unusable. It's inaccessible. You can't find it. It's unusable. Okay, well, that's solved by search. There's another phrase that I'm trying to find the right pithy response to, because you can't really translate that to blah people. But there's people that are in the dark. There's people within any organization that don't have the skilling, the training, or even the access to applications. So there's a lot of people who live in Salesforce and ServiceNow. There's a whole ton of people in the employee workforce that don't have access to those tools, but could benefit from that information. So how do I make sure that those employees, which are the larger majority of the company, are benefiting and creating value for the organization and getting access to that information? So agents will be an onboarding mechanism. It's a bridging mechanism. Employees have the benefit and the access to that information. And of course, customers. Oh, there's some hip, cool music. Ignore the music as much as you can. I'll try to talk over it. One of the benefits, there's probably two benefits that really come from the new kind of multimodality, as I said, the ability to look at images and video and all that, but also the ability to do the assisted or conversational search. So in this situation here, a doctor is basically asked, to somebody to go see a specialist. There's a referral. The patient goes on here and asks for some questions. And it's a basic lookup. It's going out to maps. It's going out to reviews. It's going out to your insurance to see who's being covered. It's doing a lot of lookup behind the scenes. And it's guiding the patient through a process to identify which specialist to go see. And then, of course, helping to take action by making the booking. So going through from soup to the end on building that out. We were talking earlier about a company in the US that's around the referrals. What did you say, 600 million valuation?
Yeah, just raised 100 million at 600.
I like 600 better. It's probably 100 million, but still a lot of money in finding one little process or workflow and automating that and building out an agentic solution. I heard about a month and a half ago at this point, Walmart in the US, they successfully went from being a brick and mortar store to digital. Yay! They figured out search engine optimization, so they got the right line share of their transactions. They spun off a team to focus on the agent-to-agent marketplace. This is going to be a dark, silent marketplace. We don't have guardrails really in place yet. No one's really, including Google, talking about how we're going to monitor and maybe capitalize on agentic transactions. But Walmart wants to make sure that when an agent's deciding to buy a toy or a TV or a big pack of toilet paper, why would they go to Walmart and not Amazon? Or why would they go to Target? So if you can think about that a little bit, any of these large companies here need to start thinking about how are they going to compete and win in this virtual agentic marketplace world. Mercedes in their CLA class, they came out a few months back providing basically a driver assistant. So again, we're bringing information from their telemetry in the car. They're bringing information from maps. They're bringing in the previous navigation routes, and they're allowing for a conversation. Hey, I don't like the traffic right now. Is there another route we could go? Can you please avoid tolls? Oh, I'm not comfortable driving in the city. Can we circumvent it? So in a conversational way, working with your car to adjust things. I think I think they call it, I don't know, Automotive AI, I think is a great use case of trying to bring it to the experience, not making it awkward or technical, just making it very natural. And I think my last demo here, I don't know if you've seen this. About a year ago, we had Project Astra, which was our multimodal generative AI assistant. That was a year ago. That was actually more than a year ago. And I say this only because the technology has actually been out. You could go and cobble together these type of solutions. But what was lacking was the ability for a company or somebody to build that experience. We've come back up with a newer version of it, which I'll show you here in a little bit. But just keep in mind, the whole goal of these agents is to unlock that collective intelligence, but also to build an experience that can scale. So ultimately, we want to make sure that there's this personal assistant in everybody's phone or tablet or car that can help guide them through stuff. I'm going to watch a little bit.
Human manual or a Huffy mountain bike?
I have found a user manual for you. What would you like to know about it?
Okay, cool. Now scroll until you find the section about the brakes.
Sure thing. Looking for that page now.
I think I stripped this screw. Can you go on YouTube and find a video for how to fix that?
Of course. I'm opening YouTube now. This looks like a good video.
Place a rubber band over the head of the screw. Oh, man, can you go through my emails with the bike shop and find which size PEX nut I need?
Sure. According to the email from Bicycle Habitat, you need a 3/8 inch hex nut for your sprocket. I've
highlighted the correct fit for you.
So that's not a product. I'm not selling here. Like there's no QR code to download now. But if you go into Gemini on our app, and ChatGPT and Anthropic have these similar things, but you can use the live agent now and start having a conversation with it. Everyone is exploring these different use cases, but really it's up to you. And I think just coming out of the last few months, we're now seeing that some of our hero use cases here are now being dwarfed by some of the stuff I'm hearing out there on the customer base, especially in the startup. So that ecosystem has been built, the platform is ready, and we're really seeing a lot of startups jump into it. But I'm also starting to hear from CBA and Walmart, Woolies, Woolworths, starting to come up with some really cool use cases. And agents are popping up everywhere in these large enterprises. Not cool and kind of hits at this, but we're getting there. So thank you much. I think we have some Q&A, so we can get into some more hairier questions, hopefully.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll just self-serve ourselves. Well, we're just getting set up here. We have a couple questions prepared around AI leadership for Mike and Rob, but maybe we'll just open it to the floor first. If anyone has any questions they'd like to ask of the group. Yes, in the back.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Thank you very much. My question is just about kind of state of play with the industry in Australia. Interesting views around greater adoption are kind of enterprises and companies in Australia really getting stuck and going for this relative to other markets like the US or Canada or Europe. Yeah. On that.
I'll state the obvious just to get that one off our chest. And I think we had a good conversation about maybe some benefits compared to Silicon Valley, which I think maybe you can share. But I've spent a few weeks doing a bit of a tour with public sector and with the new Minister of Innovation and Science, Tim Ayres. I think he's bringing hopefully a fresh look on this. But the reality is Australia is behind. There's pockets where it's ahead, and Heidi, they call themselves Heidi now. Heidi Health is a great example, but there's a number of other startups that are doing some cool shit. But in general, on average, we're behind. There's this persistent concern about sovereignty and having all the data and skills and everything else in country, which I think is an ambitious and good goal to have, but it's ultimately going to hold us back at the pace of change that's going through here. So yes, I would say that there's a lot of room for us to grow, but I'm hopeful and I see some optimism coming from public sector finally, which is great.
Yeah, for me, I was actually just at Tech Week last week. And so that's kind of a centering of all the tech capability in the US, in good old New York City. I would agree. I say the US is probably at least 12, probably 18 months ahead in terms of like general business AI adoption and implementation in their companies. I think your point's well taken. I mean, Australia is a bit more parochial in terms of how we do deals here. Where in the United States, it is, I have to put AI in my organization. They're a bit more binary around the opportunity that's in front of them. So I'd say that at least 12 months ahead in terms of adoption.
I'll just add one thing from the startup layer. So the recent State of Australian Startup Funding report basically sort of called out a mood of cautious optimism for the year. Startup funding last year in Australia was $4 billion, and that was up 11% from the year before, which sounds quite a low increase, but actually if you look around the region, it was the second fastest growing country in Asia Pacific. So India was the only other country that grew. Korea actually dropped by 60%, Southeast Asia by 40%. So the funding's coming in, and a large part of that funding is going to AI for the new startups. A disproportionate amount is going into the later stage rounds for the bigger companies. But you'll find that a lot of that is also being used for transformative purposes. So, the VCs are very focused on it. That's where a large part of their deal flow is coming through. And it's quite good quality deal flow as well, which I wouldn't say is necessarily the case around other parts of the Asia Pacific region. But then let's put all that into context compared to Silicon Valley. And it is, light years ahead, let's say 12 to 18 months ahead in terms of, how progressed those startups are.
I think we'll see, maybe just one other comment is we'll see some traction in the private equity space here in Australia. Australia is over-indexed in PE just generally. And the MO of a PE company is very much aligned to, how to implement AI in their organizations, the concept of, agentic synergies outside of the typical synergies that we have. So there may be some fast movers within the country or within different sectors. Yes.
Great presentations, really enjoyed it. I work on the AI adoption and education part of it, and I kind of want to check my understanding and my approach with you, because I'm going into organizations going like, shiny toy, there's so much we can do, like with all of the things that you're showing us today around agents. And I'm actually finding that the tools that they've got now are being completely underutilized. Most of the teams are not using them, and you kind of show them some quite basic stuff. So I'm wondering, to get to agents, do we need to lift that everyday use of just everyday tools, or actually do you do both? Implement agents over here while trying to get the standard literacy, using a bit of Copilot, sort of in tandem?
Yeah. Maybe I'll take that first. Our take on it is that if you think about an organization, it's a collection of people's experiences that have been put into workflows, right? And so, as I said before, our businesses are literally shaped by the SaaS software, right? As a salesperson, you go in and part of your job is to enter data into a system and create an opportunity. And that with invisible AI or with that substructure that can be created, they don't need those things. And so often what we suggest to companies is to create like what we call an AI parallel, which is literally start again AI first, and what don't you need in your organization, right? So this concept of lots of customer data or dark data, like, do you actually need that when Agentic AI can go out to LinkedIn and find all the context information for all the customers or prospects in it, right? And it's to kind of do a little bit of a reimagining of those workflows, and then see how those people in the organization might work with it. So as opposed to kind of jamming it into their organizations. And I think also Gartner, I attended a couple for my sins as well, but over in the States, they use this thing about like productivity leakage. So when a person becomes more productive and they don't have to write an email, what do they do with that time? The answer is nothing. Or get a coffee, get a rest, right? So that would be my take, is to look at, it's about a reimagining of things. And there's comparables everywhere. Like, so offline to online, you do not take your offline business and you don't just replicate it, right? It's a different experience. We have to think about Agentic AI that way. So
yeah, I'm not surprised, maybe just on that, like, it's a bit like the Field of Dreams. They built it, no one comes. The technology, just giving them Copilot, and I'll throw them under the bus a little bit. They were one of the first ones to hit the market, and that's sometimes a benefit and sometimes it's not. The market, I don't think, was ready yet to take the most advantage of it, right? Versus RPA, when that came out 12 years ago, the technology wasn't quite ready, but people were ready to automate their jobs so they can grab more copies. So there's a secret balance here. I think right now the AI tools, we benefit by raising the bar because everybody has access to Gemini.google.com or Notebook. They're using that at home, so they come to work and they want to use it. Companies are holding them back. But if they give them the tools, though, you still need to help raise the bar. But I would still, in parallel, build out your workflows, because those equate to outcomes. Outcomes are still universal. You don't need to train somebody on why this outcome is good. They inherently know the outcome is good. But for them to trust it and longer-term sustainability, you're going to want the employees to have enough education that they more or less know what's going on behind the scenes. Right.
all good. All good. You had a question, Mila? Yes.
I'd inject two different questions, so I don't have to hassle you again. Question number one is around the data side. So I'm working in the fintech space, so you can imagine the apprehension of the customer, the more data is shared across different areas, especially when we're talking transactional data. I guess, how do you see businesses that you're sort of working with handling that sort of data privacy and how data moves, especially when you're starting to look at an expanded ecosystem where potentially we're looking at your LinkedIn profile and things like that. When I do validation on a sort of micro level, I get a lot of customer apprehension. So how do you sort of counteract that, I guess? That's great on the operational side, but how do you put it to the forefront, I guess, is question one. And question two is more on the sort of VC side, because we're also raising capital. We've all become AI first, so we're approaching that from an operational perspective. But what I've found, the more you talk about that with VCs, is this become this sort of cosmic rolling of eyes, like, oh, another AI first business, you know, where I guess you don't want to approach the problem as we're building something that's AI first. You want to approach it as solving a customer problem. But how do you also outline to a VC that you're looking at building the business of the future that is not, you know, built on the tens of thousands of employees of the, you know, that a traditional business would have been built on? I guess that's the two.
I mean, Stu, do you want to start with the first?
No, why don't you do the money one?
I've seen the rolling of eyes. Like, there was a partner, Airtree, I had a lunch with a couple of days ago. And I said, so what have you been, I was excited, what have you been investing recently? And he rolled his eyes at AI companies. And it was it. But the reality is that it's like 100% of the deal flow. So there is this kind of, yes, there's this like, oh, you're an AI startup, but that's what they're expecting and wanting. But they don't want you to necessarily position as, I am an AI first solution. So you did answer your own question. You're right. It is about what's the customer problem you're tackling? What's the size of the market? You know, who are you? What are you? Why are you going to do this differently? Who are the competitors? And again, like in particular, I think where you can show that you are taking on some of the incumbents with this, you know, refreshed new AI capabilities, where the incumbents are being a bit slower because they're cautious to adopt AI, because they're nervous about the data, they don't really understand it, or just because they've been, you know, getting great traction with the way they're going. So I think it sort of ties to that first question. We've got this sort of, we've always had this complacent prosperity in Australia, driven by sort of mining sector. And so startups have taken a while to kind of get going. And I think that that's sort of also, you know, we do have four very large incumbents within the financial services sector. And it's like disrupting needs to happen, like you know, needs to happen both within those businesses and it needs to happen outside those businesses. So I think being able to tell your story clearly as to why you're the right person to do that. The VCs are still all looking for the same things that they were looking for before. Right? And like the moat is probably the hardest thing with AI, in this sort of verticalized AI, to be able to define. And I've asked a lot of VCs this, how do you build that moat? You know, if you haven't got a lot of your own protected data, because that's generally where it's going to sort of sit. And the general answer is about speed to market and being able to win and gain market share very quickly and kind of build it that way. So I think if you can have a good answer for that, but ultimately everything else is the standing. Yeah. Can you remember the other one?
Data-wise, three layers to that solution that come to mind. First off, technical. I think there's a well-trodden path. I think the technology is there to be able to help govern, watch, monitor, secure, encrypt. I think people think that we're reinventing something, but I think I would say from a technical perspective, I feel like we could trust data. We should be able to trust data. The reality is, because of the other two, we're not trusting the technical. The second one is really around, you know, the legal aspect. I think there's a lot of confusion. Who owns the data that comes out of a model? Who owns the data that the application has? Salesforce just came out with their judgment or their call that Slack data sits within them and not the customer. And I think that's going to cause a little bit of upheaval until we figure out who owns the data. Even stuff like video and images that are created through a model, who owns the IP? You know, Google came out saying that basically you own it. If you create the coolest puppy walking over the clouds, that's all you, for better or for worse. You own the IP. But that's not to say that you don't need to do the research and understand that. And I say it jokingly, but it's real. So understanding the legal aspect is quite important. The third one is really around the trust and the value proposition, the value trade-off. GDPR, which came out from a data perspective, starts to touch a little bit on this, but there's concepts out there around the right to reasonable inference, which is another fancy way of sort of saying the value trade-off. If I'm a customer and I'm using a fintech tool to aggregate my transactions, there's an implied value to that, and I'm willing to share my information. If you can't even talk about that layer, then yes, the customers aren't going to give you their data. I don't know.
Quickly, like at Decidr, I think it's all about federation in the future. And I take a pretty like common sense approach to it. Like number one is your data is actually in a whole bunch of different places. You know, to Rob's point, it's in Salesforce, it's in Slack, it's in Xero, it's in et cetera, et cetera. And so there's kind of two things. One is you want to federate that, and that's why we work with great companies like GCP to take a horizontal platform and put it all in one place, right? With all the layers of GCP security and compliance and trust and sovereign location, et cetera, et cetera. And then the second piece is there's actually a new piece of IP which is being created. I mean, you just talked about it, which is your agentic IP. So when you create things in your organizations by using these LLMs, just like you wouldn't let an employee walk out the door without a non-compete or without a non-disclosure, or they don't walk out the door with all your logins, the same thing happens with this new agentic capability that you're building, whether it be really narrow point solutions on a task or workflow based, or more broadly with like a full agentic workflow, right? That is thinking creatively itself. Okay, any other questions? Yes.
Companies. So we have a company, it's a scale up in consumer products, and we have 50 people who are not really using much AI at all. And I'm kind of going, we've got to use AI, you know, and that's partly why we're here today. But how do you work with companies like that?
Yeah, in e-commerce or startup, it would be very much what I mentioned earlier is actually to create a parallel of your business. So, you know, dealing with the founders directly and saying, okay, what do you want your outcomes to be? You know, to Rob and Mike's point before, you can now give AI a goal, and the future is not prompt engineering, it's goal engineering, right? And these agentic AI, when put together properly, they can start achieving those goals. So how we do it at Decidr, we would sit down with you, obviously understand what your objectives and your goals are, what your aspirations for your company are. And then it's creating an AI parallel of your organization. So you have your e-commerce website, you would have ai.yourcompanyname.com.au. And just like as you would launch a new website, you know, you first put 5% of your traffic to your new website to make sure if it doesn't break. The same thing happens with this AI parallel. And that, again, it's connecting all of your accounting data, your CRM data, your customer data, your Shopify data, et cetera, and then letting it go.
95% of our business goes through small business. So we have reps on the road and we use distributors. So it's not all direct to consumer.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, we can catch up after, but a lot of the time it's actually then looking at, well, how do you communicate with those, how the reps communicate with those end customers without knowing the industry that you're in. But we do have deploys with everything in hospitality industry to financial services to e-commerce to et cetera. So it depends on the use case, but principally it's about bringing that data together. To Rob's point, is like how do you get that? How do you get the data to everyone? And everyone also includes agents, right? In that kind of new organization that you'll be building. Yeah. Other questions? No. Oh, yeah.
Just a quick question regarding risk, especially in this space, right? In terms of business models, probably 2 years ago, no one knew what AI was. A year ago, we didn't know what vertical search was in AI. Today, we're getting introduced to agentic, and your business model, and a lot of business models out there, are built on all these new technology. How do you know that this exists 6 months from now?
Good question. I mean, I think often what I say to people is Decidr is the dumbest it's will ever be today, right? And so what that means is, you know, underneath Decidr is we're a large language model agnostic. And so when you think about like our perspective is we're creating a layer that sits on top of some of this remarkable technology that sits there. And it's really about building an adaptable layer on from our perspective. We are not a point solution provider. We're a generalized platform. And by doing that, we will, in the future, let brilliant people build on top of our platform and start to solve for the rapid transformation of like the world and all the technology that's happening.
So basically, Decidr would then become a collection of amazing minds in AI.
Yes.
Not a product.
And I'd hold them accountable to the same metrics that make up any business plan. So I think an AI company that comes to you and says, trust me, I'm going to get the latest LLM, I would say, why invest in that? So the VCs don't do that. But like all of your examples talked about net promoter score, increased revenue, you know, the time to response. These are business metrics that any team. So whether you're a wrapper like Cursor or another agent, it's business metrics that you can evaluate them on.
So it's like a consultancy in the AI space.
Our business, no, it's not a consultancy. It's a generalized platform, but we work with businesses to try and find, well, I mean, what their business problems are. And the great thing about it having an adaptable platform, and again, in the Decidr platform, we take horizontal data and we have AI manage it, meaning that it's a bit of hyperbole, but that perfect data, you can start to deploy agents very impactfully there. So whether that be in bookkeeping or whether that be in e-commerce or with reps on the road, it kind of doesn't matter, right? It's moving towards an outcome. And in We really, Paul and I haven't come across a use case yet where the fully loaded cost of deploying the agent as compared to human organization is always factors better,
Yeah.
right? Any other?
Yeah, question. Yeah, I was just wondering, like the enterprises and businesses that are kind of in the middle of their journey, what would you recommend for organizations to be able to start off, or at least actually further solidify existing LLMs that they've actually got established? Would you think like a center of excellence based approach or federated based approach in terms of disseminating the capability? How would you kind of think about an organization adopting some of these new technologies?
I'll try. Look, it comes down to the type of people you have in a company. So if I go talk to Canva, they'll say federate. If I go talk to an old school bank, they might actually start off with a hub and spoke. I believe, though, the average will not be hub and spoke. I think if you create a hub and spoke type of operating model, you're going to get smart people walking around trying to find a solution for the hammer. I think these solutions are going to be found in the trenches with the sales team, with the partnership team, with the marketing team, with the warehouse team. So what your trick is going to be about embedding this types of solution-oriented people, almost consultative in a way, not to use the word consulting, but problem solvers that are going to go out there in the trenches, fall in love with the problem, and then try to solve it. And yes, agentic solutions might be part of that. I would say, though, if you already have some existing technology, what we're finding is that building out pipelines for evaluating and constantly monitoring the tech, whether it's the model or the pipeline or the agents, that kind of rigor is going to pay off as you start to mature, and especially when you start to scale out, because the same model might work really well for marketing, but not for the warehouse. So you can scale the tech, but I wouldn't scale the problem solving by a single spot in the middle.
Yeah, we work often like with small and medium-sized businesses, so we don't do a lot with enterprise businesses. And our preference is to work directly with the founder or the CEO. Like, these are the people that make decisions in these businesses. And in many cases, they're doing the zero accounting on Saturday mornings. And so it's about, using their deep understanding of the business to then apply this technology into it. So I guess that would be a centralized approach. There's another question here, yes.
I have a question around vertical versus horizontal AI. Like you mentioned, like vertical is going to be outdated and horizontal is the future. So I'm a founder who's building a vertical solution. So what should I be thinking about, or what should I be doing so we don't go out of existence? Like, how do we plug into this gateway ecosystem?
Sure. I'll give you two fast answers, then I'll pass it to the guy with the money. I would say that talk to our team to see how you can build on the Decidr platform. There's your first answer. And the second one is a bit tongue in cheek, is like, move quickly, get velocity, and get acquired from a I guess a startup perspective.
Yeah, I think look, certainly VCs are very focused on those horizontal solutions at the moment, investing in them. And that's across the base of the thought that a large platform like Google Gemini would never go too specialized into these like micro verticals. And so you have this ability to, really zoom in on your particular area, train it up with your data set, and curate an experience for the users that really, talks to that use case. So I think that's great for now. I think it's then just a question of, and it's whether it's M&A, but essentially it's integration into other parts of the business to be able to give you that stickiness and to be able to really get, it's a different answer if you're a direct consumer versus if you're selling into businesses. Because direct consumer, there's no need for that. You can just keep going on your vertical. But if you are selling into businesses, then it's like, how do you just become more sticky within their broader HR platforms, so that you're becoming like a very key part of their day-to-day processes. Otherwise, it's an easy one to just switch off, and that's ultimately what you want to avoid.
Just a couple more questions. I saw one in the back, and then we'll. Sorry, yeah.
We've been working on robotic process automation for specific regulatory and compliance sector and creation of output. Some of the things we've been doing is adding contextual awareness and decision making. That's a part of research that's been happening with UNSW for the last 4 years. That's quite specific to making key decisions. Like, their products come from US FDA into Europe, into China, into things. What does the change have to happen? Most of the people on the ground don't know some detail. the blacklist that you talked about, dark space of information, for the agents or the actual robots to understand that and use that decision. Now, what I'm looking at is with the Agentic AI systems which are coming there, there's a lot of parallels with what we've been doing in terms of decision points, sets of robots in specific areas, making the decision and coming together. Have you seen some parallels with RPA transformation using the agentic stuff that's coming in play? Where's the shift happening from an RPA process to a pure AI agentic multimodal?
I think it's just the next evolution of it. I think it's a great starting point. But then I think, as David was saying, rather than just replicating the same thing you did back then, because that's what technology allowed you to do, I'd reimagine it a little bit. So like you said, adding a little bit of decision making, adding a little bit of generality, where do I go next type of thing. You're not forced to do that rigid workflow anymore because of technical reasons. So I think RPA in some shape or form is basically automation of workflows. That's not going away.
No, I don't think so. We and you mentioned something about like taking hidden knowledge. We call it like literally taking it out of our brains. And there's more hidden knowledge in your employees than there is actually in systems. So we work with partners. There's a great company called Sugarwork out of the US who we partner with that is about knowledge capture and about finding that hidden knowledge and then using large language models to essentially productize that. And once you have it, obviously the next step is like what you do with it. Yeah. Maybe last question. Yeah.
I work with the mining and resources sector. Rob, you will remember we had a conversation sometime back. But we're looking to get more AI innovation in the plant industry, and of course, it's sort of similar to previous in the sense that they're highly risk averse, and blame them for some of the slowness in the incubation and innovation space. But there is this thing in the back of a lot of people's minds about hallucinations. Yeah. Is that over now? Is that problem, has that problem been truly solved, or is it still lingering in the boundaries of some of these models? And then I have a second question on just selecting models. There's like Rob, you showed a chart from 2004, last year to now, and there were so many things there. How does someone really? Is there an interesting process that's coming up where you can select the right kind of models?
Yeah, hallucinations. So the root cause is not solved. The root cause will never be solved. It's probabilistic models, which means there's a chance. It's a bit like the roulette wheel, right? What we have solved, though, is we put in a lot of guards. So if you actually look at, there's some metrics and reports that look at hallucinations. And during the heyday, I think there was like a 30% hallucination rate. We've gone down to basis point percentages on some of our models, not just Gemini, but other ones. And that's been done by introducing reasoning. It's been done by introducing better RAG and information retrieval or better context windows. There's a lot of tricks, if you will, or hacks that has allowed all these models to get a lot less likely to do hallucinations. But it is an inherent problem with probabilistic models. There are deterministic ML models. And what I think we need to do is find ways that agents can marry the two together. So where it matters, you use something that's going to be a little bit more predictable. But yeah, no, I think the problem's not been solved, but it has been solved to some degree. How's that?
Yeah, from my perspective and from Decidr, it's about, and we're kind of seeing that trend, it's the atomization of agents. So, at Decidr, our agents are incredibly small. So there's an agent whose only job is to get the first name for a customer record. And so when it's that small, it becomes more conditionally logic-based. And, agentic agents are able to look horizontally and talk to other agents. They're able to go into the LLMs. They're able to look at the horizontal data, and they're also able to go outside into the world, right, and find that. And so our solution is to, yes, hallucination is never zero. However, when you make the task as atomic as possible, it's very hard to mess up a suffix, right, if that's its job.
I loved your example of like an agent going out into the world. It's like, hello, do you know this first name? Do you know their first name? Do you know the first name? In terms of model selection, I'd say we're seeing a lot of even startups that are just testing, not just testing the different models, but then adopting multiple models as well. And so firstly, there's a big cost disparity. So depending on how important, for instance, the speed of the transaction is, the latency is, and the complexity of it, you could be using Gemini Flash, which is our low latency model, super cheap. You know, if you've got a more complex workload, then you'd be using Gemini Pro. The 2.5 Pro is the latest. But then you also find that, you know, for different types of tasks, that Anthropic might be much better, or Llama might be better, and of course, I guess there's OpenAI. And so it's being able to build in such a way that you can actually optimize and sort of, you know, hit these different models for the different types of you know, queries that you're looking to put out there. Bearing in mind the cost loading as well. So within Google Cloud Platform, we have what's called the Model Garden, which is essentially being able to access hundreds of models, not sure, over 150, different third-party models, as well as, of course, Gemini natively. And so, you know, those include things like Llama, even though that's Meta's, right? Or DeepSeek is in there as well. Anthropic as Claude. So there's this huge range of models. You can sort of get in there and test it, and depending on like how creative you want it to be or how strong at maths and reasoning, there's also something called the chatbot arena board, which will give you the ratings of the different models across different areas, such as science, maths, etc. So you can have a look there. Changes every couple of weeks. Google had first, second, and third slot on it last week. And I told the team we got a presentation tonight, but I didn't screenshot it. And we went to screenshot it yesterday, and we're now first, second, and sixth. It's like, damn it.
Well, things move really quick. Actually, that's probably a good thing. But good news is that you're all here, so you're all ahead of most of the people in the country. So congratulations. Mike and Rob, thank you for joining us today. It's really great. You're a very busy man, and I appreciate it on behalf of the audience. And for all of you, thank you for taking the time this morning.